You know, whenever I watch these Spongebob episodes for the first time, I instantly think that these episodes were good, knowing how people were praising them, but then I also remember 10 minutes later that these episodes were taking ideas from previous season episodes that center around the Flying Dutchman and his ship, with SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward climbing on board. I don't remember the episode's name, but I still remember what that episode was like. Okay, before you complain, I actually found this episode entertaining from a normal perspective that doesn't take show seriously, and considering that this episode isn't as annoying in comparison to the other SpongeBob episodes that I went through, it's really a plus that I can instantly sit through this episode just as much as the Flying Dutchman episode that featured SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. So the plot of this episode is Plankton came up with an idea after watching a scary movie about being a ghost in order to steal the Krabby Patty formula. Unfortunately, he can't be able to pick up the formula with him being a ghost, and the only way for him to pick up any items is to take some ghost lessons from the Flying Dutchman. And with this mainly taking ideas from the Flying Dutchman episode that he encountered SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward, I'm gonna be really honest with you, even if this episode took inspiration from that episode, it really feels like that they really try a lot in order to make this different and also unique at the same time, since this is technically the first time where the Flying Dutchman and Plankton are interacting when it comes to the show. Granted, I could be incorrect when it comes to some sort of detail when it comes to Plankton and Flying Dutchman interacting, but when it comes to the show, it could be that this is the first time that they ever met. And if it is true, then I gotta say, I actually found this pairing really good, considering that even if this is part of the newer seasons, that we would have seen the interactions much more better in the earlier seasons. It really feels like that they really wanted this mainly a fan service episode involving Plankton teaming up with the Flying Dutchman, even though it's not really a team up, it's mainly getting lessons from the Flying Dutchman, which is a lot more different in comparison to the Flying Dutchman giving lessons towards SpongeBob, Patrick, and maybe Squidward. You know, I honestly thought that this episode's premise was going to have the Flying Dutchman turning Plankton into a ghost, but since that Plankton made an invention that makes him turn into a ghost, it actually feels a lot more out of the ordinary, but at the same time I keep forgetting that Plankton is an evil genius. As for the Flying Dutchman in this episode, in comparison to how he was portrayed in the other episode, it made me convinced that he is literally just being a little over the top, and yet at the same time, I actually found him a lot more better than in this in comparison to how he was portrayed in Are You Afraid of the Dog from the Camp Cola spinoff. Because let me tell you, I understand that his motivations in that episode was a lot more different, but at the same time, when it comes to the motivations in this episode, it made me appreciate his character a lot more, which, since it's taking place in the mainstream series of SpongeBob, having him being part of a spin-off isn't really a good idea when everyone around him is different. As in how they were portrayed with the environment all around them, and the fact that even if they do have similarities of their older counterparts, it doesn't change the fact that it's mainly a toned-down SpongeBob version of the main series. Like, as far as I'm concerned, when the Flying Dutchman isn't being in this position like he was in Camp Cola, is really saying something that I actually relate to him a lot more in this in comparison to the Camp Cola spinoff. For the episode itself, with Plankton learning these lessons from the Flying Dutchman, I have to say, in comparison to how Patrick and SpongeBob are trying to learn lessons from the Flying Dutchman, this really feels a lot more accurate considering that Plankton was turned into a ghost, and in comparison to the other episode, it was done for comedy purposes because I remember the bit of SpongeBob and Patrick doing figure skating during the montage, which, if there was a montage, really makes that episode a lot more humorous and a lot more clever in comparison to this episode. But for this episode's credit, it really feels like it's trying to take these characters and pair them up, and knowing how, though, that the SpongeBob episode that ended up scrapping in favor of this involves the girl pals of Sandy Cheeks and Paul working together, maybe there was a lot more going on in those episodes that I just didn't witness nor had the time to understand, considering that they're literally doing different ideas despite taking ideas from previous seasons. Then again, the newest seasons always do a lot of facial expressions, to the point that it's a lot more common in comparison to the previous eras of SpongeBob. Though then again, this facial expression that you're seeing right now is probably the best facial expression that I've seen throughout this entire episode. Let's get into the funeral, which is the ending of this episode, where everyone goes to Plankton's funeral, including Mr. Krabs, despite being enemies towards Plankton. And to tell you the truth, I just don't find this believable. Like, the fact that Karen, who is close to Plankton, and the fact that she didn't realize that the body of Plankton was inside of a ghost machine, it just raises more questions that this just really feels phoned in. And considering that it's mainly phoned in for everyone else to beat down Plankton, it's somewhat accurate, but at the same time it just feels really out of the ordinary, since that the Flying Dutchman was planned to take control of Plankton's body only to get crushed by the people all around him. Whenever people are addressing the fact that the movie, mainly the first movie, is the finale of all of this, mainly the words from the people who made this show, I'm just gonna say this right now. You can't make me convinced that anyone will ever go to Plankton's funeral, because Plankton still did terrible things to anyone, and it's honestly difficult for me that they're willing to be part of Plankton's funeral. Like, I know that some of these characters, or mainly all of them, are characters that we've seen in other SpongeBob episodes. Look, I understand that the point of this funeral is mainly Plankton enjoying being alive rather than being a ghost, but the more you think about it, it really feels like that this is only a way for the Flying Dutchman to get punishment, while having an ending that is similar to Little Letter Book, which, for this episode's credit, it's better than that. But at the same time, it just makes me question on the citizens of the Bikini Bottom, even if they're doing good deeds, mainly being nice towards other people. Then again, I'm pretty sure that the citizens in this show, when it comes to the newer seasons, are trying to have different character growth, knowing full well of how they were portrayed in the previous eras, because I'm starting to remember how unlikable these characters were in the earlier eras of SpongeBob. But it's not enough for me to get invested into the newer era of SpongeBob. I know the current era isn't new since it's been around for almost a decade, but at the same time, I really can't be able to get into anything involving SpongeBob related unless if it's Battle for Bikini Bottom or anything that is video game related. But aside from the ending alone, I found this episode enjoyable, and with this replacing the other SpongeBob episode that involves the Girl Pals, which is a cabin in need of kelp. I know that's not the actual title, I forgot what it is. I actually think that this is a better choice, and I might be able to review that episode next year if I get the chance to do more Halloween reviews next year. Besides, at this point I've done quite enough of Flying Dutchman material involving SpongeBob episodes for this schedule. The only year that I didn't include the Flying Dutchman in a Spongebob episode review was in 2019, where I reviewed the Gary episode where SpongeBob turns himself into a snail. But that's literally it, and I hope that next year it's gonna be Flying Dutchman 3, even though that Ghosts may return, but just not in Flying Dutchman form. I'm giving this episode a 7.25 out of 10.